to have cultural competencies. But here are some of the broad competencies that we need to be aware of and we need to be able to use. Knowledge of cultures. Any one of us in this room can be culturally competent there. Some of us more so in terms of specific cultures, but I can be a lot more culturally competent in other cultures than I am. My first job, I have to tell you that Steve and I had lunch with Marilyn Miller today. And she asked me, well, when did you work as a school librarian? And I told her it was my very first job, my first professional job. And it was before I actually went to school to get my MLS. And I told her that I worked in a school library on an Indian reservation, K through 12. And that one of the best things about working there was the fact that I was immersed in that culture, and I was mesmerized. I was mesmerized by the Native American culture, and then being able to go back to New Mexico and to be part of my culture again. You know, when I give you the data, you know, at least 40% in New Mexico are Hispanic and about 20% are Native American. To be immersed in a state of two really rich and vibrant cultures. I learned again more about the Native American culture when I went back to New Mexico to work at UNM. So the point that I'm making is that we can continue to learn more about other cultures, and we should. Another broad area is in cultural competencies is having the skills in dealing with those different cultures. I did a talk not too long ago, and again I'll tell you as soon as I start talking about the experience what the topic was about. But in the talk I was talking about having to when I was working at the University of Denver. Having to deal with a group, and the discussion was actually about prejudice, and I was admitting that at one point there had been a time in my career that I had been prejudiced, and that was when the Department of Treasury, the U.S. Department of Treasury, contacted the library school and asked if we would be willing to take in about 15 Saudi male students with their families. And that was going to be my responsibility to get them into the program, to get them in the ESL program at the university, to get the kids in school, to get the wives, gynecologists. I mean, it was I was responsible for everything. And I have to tell you that my experience had been only in college and after college, had been with wonderful Jewish friends. And the media had also, quite frankly, had also prejudiced me against Mideastern people. And I also heard and read about they didn't have a lot of respect for women. So I have to tell you that I was really uncomfortable. I was going to do it, and I would do the best, but I was really uncomfortable about this because of all the prejudices that I had heard about Mideastern men. And I was only in my 20s at the time. But I did everything to prepare to bring them in. We got them enrolled in programs. We got them enrolled, some of them into the MLS program. And then they came on a plane, and they were coming from Boston, and they were not successful at Boston, and all I have to do is say where they were at, and some of you will understand why they were not successful there. They had started them at Boston University. I mean, what was that? Talk about insensitivity. Insensitivity. I mean, they didn't last a semester. So I met them, and I talked to, we have one of the best international studies, the Graduate School of International Studies at the University of Denver. In fact, it ranks one of the top 3 in the country. And I went and talked to a colleague that's an expert in Mideastern affairs, and because I needed to be prepared. You know what? It was all for naught. They got off the plane, and I think they, after having the experience they had at Boston University, I'm sure that they were thinking, what are we getting into now? They saw me, I saw them, and it was like, oh my gosh, you know why? I looked just like them. I looked like the wives coming off the planes, off the plane. I remember Mohammed Bojamon's, his little girl. I mean, she could have been my little girl. And all of the trepidation that they were experiencing coming to a new institution, having had an unfavorable experience at BU, and then my trepidation, everything was disappeared. They treated me with respect. They invited me to their various feasts. And at their feast, the women put all the food out, and then they congregate in one room, and the kids are running around everywhere, and then the men congregate in another room. I was always invited to sit in the other room with the men, and so I would take my turns going to visit with the women and then with the male students. That was learning another culture. I still appreciate the Jewish culture and my Jewish colleagues and friends. But I learned another completely different culture. And I had a respect for that culture also. And it was a favorable experience. So I had to deal with a different culture in that particular case. And then the third broad area is bringing cultural experiences to the libraries. And again, you do not have to be a person of color to bring your cultural experiences to the libraries. Some people are Peace Corps volunteers. Some people grew up in a predominantly Latino neighborhood. It depends on what your competency is. You can bring cultural competencies to your particular library. And don't be shy about that. Now there's some benefits. And again, for those of you students, one of the things when I give this talk about advancing your career and I talk about diversity, I tell them as students or when you graduate, raise your hand when there's a task force on diversity. You don't have to be a person of color to raise your hand and say, I would like to be part of that. One of my philosophies growing up in my career was really pushing myself in areas that I knew nothing about or in areas that I felt I had weaknesses in. Now, I wasn't successful in everything, okay? But I really did put myself out there because I needed to make myself strong in areas that I didn't know, or stronger because I was weak in a particular background. This is the same concept. So you can enhance the scope of qualifications. You raise your hand, you get involved in some kind of event. For those of you who maybe are in public libraries and your library is doing something for Black History Month or for Hispanic Heritage Month or whatever, or the ELDIA program, raise your hand and get involved because